now from your local election headquarters, the only locally produced political talk show discussing the issues that matter to you. This is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Thanks for being here for Big Country Politics. I'm Victor Sotelo. We start the show with what's making political headlines across the nation, state, and the Big Country. First, from your local election headquarters. Last Saturday was Election Day in Abilene, and at the end of the night, Kyle McAllister was officially named the winner of the runoff election for Place 5 in Abilene City Council. Here is a breakdown of the election. Kyle McAllister just barely taking the election by 84 votes. McAllister took 51% with 2,922 votes. Corey Clemens got 2,838 votes. That's 49%. We were able to catch up with both Kyle McAllister and Corey Clemens. McAllister waiting out the results at the Taylor County Elections Office. The feeling in the room was of slight nervousness as the early voting results came in, followed by the first release. But once the finals rolled in, McAllister was elated that he won, even if it was by a narrow margin of just 84 votes. And while some in the city might be weary of his reign on the council, he says he's grateful for another opportunity to serve everyone.
What I hope today proves is maybe vindicating Kyle McAllister, the person. That people, while not agreeing or condoning what was posted, maybe we're able to say, okay, hey, but as a person, we expect him to be different, and we're giving him a chance to be different.
And challenger Corey Clemens posted up at Cypress Street Station, disappointed that he didn't win. He says the runoff proved that every vote really does matter.
We're 84 votes, within 84 votes of winning. That sends a message, that sends a signal to several people that there is an option, and there are some people out there that can win, other than, the usual.
Clemens says he's not ruled out running for public office in the future, simply saying that you never know what the next year holds. This is Clemens' second loss. He'd previously run in 2017, losing place 3 on the council to Donna Albus. For Kyle McAllister, this marks his third term. Now to our eye on Dyess. The change of command ceremony at Dyess Air Force Base happens every couple of years, and it's that time for the 7th Bomb Wing at Dyess. But the new commander is not new to Dyess. He's been assigned here before. Here's reporter Kelsey Pittman.
By order of the commander, Colonel Brandon D. Parker will relinquish command to Colonel Jose E. Sumingil, 7th Bomb Wing, Dyess Air Force Base, Texas, effective 17 June 2019.
Sir, I assume command.
Colonel Jose E. Sumingil comes from the National Defense University Institute for National Strategic Studies, Fort Leslie J. McNair in Washington, D.C., where he served as a senior military fellow.
I never thought I'd be back in this position, leading airmen in this capacity. And I really am honored. I'm just going to savor the moment every day.
He's no stranger to Abilene.
My 2 older kids were born here. My wife and I were actually married here. So we feel like we've been welcomed. We're part of this community.
This is his 4th time to be stationed in the Key City. The last time was in 2015.
This is where I grew up as an instructor, as an aviator, and where I had my squadron command. So it's really great to be back here.
While he's excited to be back in Abilene and get to work, there's something else he's looking forward to.
I'm really excited about Texas barbecue. There's nothing like Texas barbecue. I introduced my family to that yesterday. Some of them are from California, Rhode Island.
With coverage you can count on, Kelsey Pittman, KTAB News.
And Colonel Sumingil is responsible for the health and welfare of the more than 13,000 active duty civilian and family members at Dyess. Now to our eye on Texas. It will soon be easier to legally carry handguns into a place of worship in Texas, and new Texas law signed by Governor Greg Abbott should clear up what lawmaker calls confusion, and it's an issue that the state's Attorney General has weighed in on. Austin Bureau reporter Wes Rappaport has the details from the state's capital.
The sign out front of this Texas church is clear. No guns allowed. It's case by case for churches around the state. And in the aftermath of the deadly Sutherland Springs church shooting in 2017, State Senator Donna Campbell wanted to make a change.
There needed to be clarity. I mean, look what stopped the massacre. A good guy with a gun acting quickly. Can you imagine if somebody would have had a gun sitting in the pew how many lives would have been saved?
A month later, Attorney General Ken Paxton issued an opinion saying Texans can carry on church property unless a church provides oral or written notice prohibiting handguns. Campbell, a New Braunfels Republican, says her bill aligns Paxton's legal opinion with state statute. The bill was signed by the governor earlier this month to mixed reviews.
I feel like it's just such a violation of our Christian beliefs to have a gun in church.
Some church leaders say it doesn't solve larger safety problems.
The problem with that is when the police do come in, they don't know if the person with the gun is the active shooter hurting people or protecting people.
In the meantime, many churches have hired private security or worked with law enforcement to have officers attend services.
We have parishioners who don't like it, and I don't personally like it either, but we have come to a conclusion as church leadership that that's the right thing to do for now.
Once this law takes effect, it's up to your church to decide by posting a sign or giving verbal notice whether you will legally be able to carry on church grounds.
Okay, thank you, Wes. The legislation also lessens the penalty from a possibility of jail time and a $4,000 fine to a $200 fine. The new legislation takes effect in September. Still to come on Big Country Politics, there's a shortage of help at the Taylor County Detention Center. An in-depth conversation with the county judge next. We're back in 2 minutes.
From your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Okay, welcome back to Big Country Politics. We are in the office of Judge Downing Bowles, Taylor County Judge, and thank you for being on the show and for agreeing for this interview.
Great to have you.
Well, we wanted to talk to you about the jail. We heard you in the last Commissioners Court meeting saying a couple of things y'all are dealing with. Y'all had a record number of inmates recently at the jail. You're down a few positions when it comes to the COs over there, the correctional officers. I guess you would call them jailers or correctional officers there. And then you're dealing, obviously, with other things that we may not know about. But first I want to talk about the record number of inmates out there.
It is getting very crowded at our jail. I don't know if most people do this. On Friday morning, I'll usually take the newspaper because that's the day after the grand jury meets. And you see stories on the news at night about the grand jury when they return indictments. But you look at the number of drug offenses that we're having in this community, it is astounding what is going on in terms of the drug culture out there. A lot of people involved in the drug situation, and they end up, of course, when they get arrested, they go to jail. They get to jail, and they're really sitting in jail waiting for a trial is what they're doing over there. So in many cases, they can't be released on their own because they've offended. They're offenders, and so they're sitting at the jail, and that starts to create problems for us when they move into jail. In a perfect world, they would go into jail very quickly. They would go to trial. The trial would make a determination about what happens after that, and they'll either go to the state prison system, or if they're less than 10 years, I think they can stay here and serve their sentence out here. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. There is such a backlog of cases going on right now in the courts that, in the case of doing drug testing and stuff like that, and coming up with reports that have to be used as evidence in a trial, sometimes those take 6 months. So for 6 months, we got people sitting in our jail that are doing nothing but sitting there. So that's part of what the problem is, and I think in the next budget we've got an idea that we're looking at that might speed this process up a little bit. But we want to get them through the process as quickly as we possibly can. But I think the big takeaway for the citizens is understanding the nature of the drug culture. I hate to say we're losing the war on drugs, but it's been so long since I've heard anybody use the phrase war on drugs. I haven't heard people talk about DARE programs in a long time. So
yeah, you're right.
It has just sort of disappeared, and the culture's out there. Now we're talking about opioid addiction. So it's there's a lot of things going on right now in the drug culture, but that's kind of what's creating the backlog for us at the
Well, and that's what's going to be one of my questions. It's got to be the drug offenses that are filling up the jails. And you said you guys have some sort of an idea how to speed the process up of going to jail and then getting somebody out of there as soon as possible.
Yeah,
right?
look, if I could, and I can't get into too many particulars because this just came to my attention earlier this week, but where the bottleneck is occurring is that you have to have evidence when you go into a trial. A prosecutor must be able to go in and show that that was indeed drugs that this person was doing, or manufacturing, or testing for, or they were doing drugs. So they have these lab tests that have to be performed. We send those lab tests off. In some cases, we send them to the DPS lab to be done. There's such a backlog.
They're backed up, yeah.
Yes, and so that creates this bottleneck that's occurring. Now, the judges want to try to move those cases through as expeditiously as possible. I mean, you're supposed to be able to move through this process very quickly, but not too fast. In other words, you got time, and you have time constraints. So we're trying to make that happen. But when you come to court and they say that we don't have the evidence we need yet to be able to present this case to you, then they ask for what's called a continuance. Nothing is more frustrating than to hear at the end of the day that you had 20 cases go before the judge today and he granted a continuance in every single one of them because they weren't ready to go yet. So the bottleneck is occurring because of the lab situation. So if we can find a better place to do our lab work and speed up the process, that's what we'll do. In some cases, the state of Texas is using out-of-state labs to test their evidence. If we can do the same thing, we can shorten that period down to maybe 6 weeks. So instead of waiting 6 months, we're waiting 6 weeks, and we can be ready at that point to go to trial and get these cases processed and start clearing out some of that backlog at the jail.
Any thought to Taylor County having their own lab? Is that too expensive, or would it offset?
We haven't, the DPS here in Abilene does have a drug lab.
Yeah,
but again, that's part of where the backlog is occurring. So we don't get any kind of precedence to move to the front of the line. Although that's an idea that's being discussed as well. That if we can get it done in a more efficient manner, then perhaps we can move to the front of the line as we walk in there instead of having to wait and kind of work our way up through the line. If we come in ready to go and our cases are processed and ready to go, they'll jump to the front of the line, sort of paying an express fee, if you will, like when you go to Six Flags or something.
Sure.
So it's not Six Flags, but
yeah.
it's a whole different
deal.
Not
quite Six Flags.
Yeah.
Well, and so we have this, I don't know if you want to call it overcrowding, but a record number of people at the jail.
And we do.
And then we're sending inmates out to other jails to house for us, and that's at a cost to the county.
It does, and the big cost there is transporting those inmates back and forth.
Oh, okay.
That's really kind of, because what we're paying per day to house them in somebody else's jail is the same amount we charge if they were to stay in our jail per day. So that cost remains the same. Okay. Now, in one case, Burnett County told us they were going to raise it, I think, $5. But we're not sending many to Burnett County right now. So I think most of ours are out of Burnett County. We try to move them around and get them closer to home as we're able to do so. But the process right now is such that the transportation cost is really what we have to look at. You have to send a deputy down to pick that inmate up, bring them back here to Taylor County, where they'll appear before the judge. The judge will say, going to grant a continuance, then we got to take them back to wherever they were, okay. As we get space open at the jail, we try to move them back into our jail. We want them here at home because it's a lot more cost efficient to do them that way. The key to all of this, of course, is don't go to jail. And we're sitting here having this big discussion, and but the key to this thing is don't offend, you know, don't break the law, and you won't go to jail. I mean, you hear all kinds of solutions being tossed out. The state legislature was looking at changing the bail bond laws this time. They didn't do it, but they were looking at making it easier for people to get out of jail. And you go, well, you know what? If you've got a guy that's out there who's a meth user or a meth manufacturer, and he comes in and tells you, well, I won't do it anymore. We know from the nature of the methamphetamine that's not the case. So that's not prejudging them, but it's just simply, are they a good risk or are they a flight risk? And they might be, and that's the whole reason why you incarcerate them and why you set their bail like you do, is to keep them from fleeing and avoiding justice. So yeah, it's there's so many parts of this, and I think that's what I was trying to talk about at the Commissioner's Court. There are so many multiple parts that all work together in this thing that create this problem, create this jail overcrowding situation.
One of those parts is actually on staffing, and there was a conversation about that in Commissioner's Court recently, and I want to talk about that when we come back from commercial, about staffing and how you guys are having a problem getting people in there, and it's because you're competing with other entities, right?
You bet.
All right, we'll talk about that as soon as we come back on Big Country Politics.